Good afternoon, everyone. Why are we here today? We're here to talk about our platform. We're here to push decision makers and candidates that are going to be running for office, that are going to govern our communities, to understand the concerns of those most affected by education policy decisions. We conducted 11 listening sessions with over 300 students, educators, and families. People shared their thoughts about what is most needed to improve Baltimore City schools. The outcomes from those conversations were organized into a draft platform of 14 items. And then 1,194 stakeholders voted on those items at our mobile voting sites. The top issues will be shared by some of my comrades as they come up.
When students were asked what they needed, the three things that they said that they needed were resource classes, cultural experiences, and field trips. So our children are just asking for the color to come back into their classrooms, right? Resource classes will give them the ability to make sure that they're having a full experience and be able to take out what they're learning from the classroom into the world. The cultural experience is the same, as well as the field trips. Now, we have a state that's mandated that we should spend this money, yet when it comes down to the city level, it's not being spent. And so we need people, officials, who when put in place are going to know that they're responsible for fully funding the arts, because our children need to have wholesome experiences in school that can take them from being in the classroom to being human beings and being able to function outside of the classroom.
I'm here to speak on the continuous lack of funding provided to Baltimore City schools. More than 50 years ago in Brown v. Board of Education, the United States Supreme Court acknowledged that African American students were being denied the right to an integrated and equitable public education. We have not come far enough. Out of all the priorities in our education platform, adequate funding for Baltimore City schools is a concern the community has voiced for years. Maryland's current funding formula is regressive, meaning students in richer districts are receiving higher per pupil funding than students in poorer districts. When we shortchange some students, we shortchange our nation as a whole. Waiting for the blueprint to make our funding formula not regressive 10 years from now isn't good enough. It is time to fully fund public schools for success and equity, for we are destined to hand off our future to our young people.
So today we're here to speak about the third priority in the People's Platform for Education, meaning schools that are emotionally, physically, culturally, and academically safe. We need schools that are more restorative. We need to provide better mental health resources and other resources that students identify that meet their needs. Students need schools that are culturally safe. We need to teach, promote, and educate and celebrate around diversity within the school system, add non-binary bathrooms to schools, and host assemblies to bring together all students.
Also, every school should educate students and staff about mental health and conduct. An assessment that would show the district the number of social workers, counselors, and nurses, school psychologists, what the school community needs. City Schools has identified social emotional well-being as its top 3 priorities, but City Schools has more police officers than counselors per student, 1 officer for every 727 students versus 1 counselor for every 900 students. We should have less police inside of schools. Police are intimidating and they have the potential to cause harm. Please trust us, our teachers, and restorative practices staff to resolve our problems through restorative practices by teaching youth the impact of their decisions rather than taking them out of school, suspending them as punishment, or arresting them.
And take away the metal detectors and wands. They make the environment feel like a prison, and yes, you probably heard students say that 1,000 times, but we say it for a reason. And it really does not keep us safe from harm in that type of environment. And alter the dress code to make it less sexist and homophobic and more inclusive to all gender identities. And treat all students the same. Hold anti-LGBTQ plus teachers accountable.
To consider these recommendations, we want to make sure that students are equal partners and have real decision-making power in the implementation. To district personnel, our teachers, administrators, and the next governor of Maryland, please engage with us and have an open mind. You need our site and you need our ideas. It's very important.
I'm here to talk about the fact that we need to meet the needs when we talk about giving resources in our schools to not only struggling students, but those that want advanced opportunities. folks need opportunities all across the spectrum, right? Students need opportunities, early interventions when they are struggling. They need to be supported so that they no longer become struggling. And they need support when they want to have access to AP classes, advanced courses. Those things should not only be limited to a few schools in the city or a few, couple of students because they are close with the administration or other things, right? It's really important that we support students at all ends of the spectrum.
I'm here to state something obvious to anyone who has taught or learned a lesson in the classroom. Class size matters. It doesn't require fancy peer-reviewed studies to know that there's a huge difference between an adult driving their attention across 35 students in a room instead of 20. If we want more support for struggling and advanced students and a safe and welcoming classroom culture, then educators need the time to provide individual support and build trusting relationships. The research does back up what we all know to be true. School finance expert Professor Bruce Baker concluded, children in smaller class sizes achieve better outcomes, both academic and otherwise, and that class size reduction can be an effective strategy for closing racial and socioeconomic achievement gaps. The problem is, Maryland is one of the only 9 states where it is illegal to even bring up class size at the bargaining table. Teacher unions need the ability to bring this demand from the community into negotiations, and school districts need the resources to meet this demand without cutting from other essential needs. Lawmakers rejected bills this past session that would have made class size a negotiable subject for collective bargaining. Because there is a legal prohibition on bargaining over class size, school districts can ignore employee demands to improve class sizes even when those demands are backed by parents, students, and communities. Next session, lawmakers should reintroduce stronger versions of these bills, making class size a mandatory subject of bargaining between school employees and districts. Just as class size matters, so do caseloads for mental health support staff. School psychologists, social workers, counselors, and nurses provide a range of necessary health services in schools. However, Maryland schools do not have sufficient staff to ensure these valuable services. On average, across all Maryland schools, there is 1 school psychologist for every 1,198 students. The National Association of Social Psychologists recommends a ratio of 1 to 500. 1 social worker for every 2,324 students. The National Association of Social Workers recommends a minimum of 1 to 250, or an even lower ratio of 1 to 50 for students with intensive need. 1 school counselor for every 362 students. The American School Counselor Association recommends a minimum ratio of 1 to 250. In addition, based on the recommendations of the American Academy of Pediatrics, every school should have at least 1 full-time licensed school nurse, and each secondary school should also have 1 full-time health aide to work under the direct supervision of the licensed school nurse. Platform area number 5, our demand for smaller class sizes and more counselors are backed by common sense and research. And it's one that parents and educators have lifted up as a top concern when voting. We need a governor and elected officials across all levels of government who will meet this demand in order to create the schools our students deserve.
Baltimoreans who are most affected by public schools have a clear set of priorities. While this listening and voting process has narrowed down our collective concerns to the top 5, it was also clear from the comments and discussion in the listening sessions that all 14 issues you see here are interrelated. The overarching concern is the fact that the funding for Baltimore City schools has never been adequate, much less excellent, since the district became majority black decades ago. This has been the source of lawsuits, independent adequacy studies, and it's well documented. The historic disinvestment and racist policies have resulted in needs, both in the communities in general and in education in particular, that cannot be met without an equal commitment to redressing this history. This problem is felt by all who are involved in city schools, from facilities that no one would want to work or learn in, to academic and health needs that go unaddressed because of a lack of staff. The system is failing far too many students. Despite the progress that the blueprint represents, what is needed next is for legislators to A, find the funds to fulfill the promise of Kerwin in the long term, and B, to recognize and fully fund the gaps in the blueprint.
Now, voters across the city are clear about what is required to fix these problems. A funding formula that provides enough staff, educators, counselors, social workers, and others, to provide for learning and mental health supports for all students who need them. Smaller class sizes, as Damante stated, that allows for individualized attention to both struggling and advanced students. Less of a focus on and testing a narrow set of subjects, and instead, a fully funded mandate for arts, field trips, and relevant out-of-school experiences. Fully renovated or new school buildings across the whole city. A commitment to making all school places where emotionally, physically, and cultural needs and differences are respected and addressed. And schools where adults have the opportunity to build deep, trusting relationships, which is necessary for realizing a safe, fun, dynamic, and creative and relevant education. The 9-month deep engagement process of building the People's Platform for Education demonstrated to Baltimore Arrow's table members that there exists a tremendous amount of overlap in what students, parents, staff, and community members want to see in our public schools. Despite this interest convergence, the people directly impacted by education policy decisions, like me, continue to feel as if their voices do not matter and that they lack true decision-making power, with shots being caught by those with the least skin in the game. True stakeholder engagement would look like including the directly impacted from the start of the policy-making process.
We challenge every gubernatorial candidate to publicly commit to this platform in its entirety and the policy recommendations within. Sharing vague agreements with 1 or 2 planks of this platform is insufficient. The interrelated nature of the issues facing public schools require a pledge to the platform in its entirety. We are not here to endorse a single individual and work on their behalf. The more than 1,500 students, parents, educators, and community members are here to lift up any and every candidate who is willing to say gradual improvement on the inequitable status quo over the course of a decade isn't good enough. We need a governor who demands justice now as the bar for success. Baltimore Eros is committed to working with any legislator willing to help translate these platform areas into legislation that can tangibly build the schools our students deserve. Thank you.